A rail yard outside Fort Worth, 3 in the morning, 41 degrees and raining sideways. He is walking a mile of standing freight with a lantern, counting cars, looking for one bad knuckle. $23.40 an hour, and he is 22. 9 years later, the same man cleared $163,000 and had not touched a handbrake in 4 of them. 31 out of every 100 people who start conductor training are still there after 2 years. Everything that happened to him in between was decided by a single number, and it was not his pay grade. Almost everyone gets one thing backward about trains. They think the engineer is in charge. The engineer runs the locomotive. The conductor runs the train. The conductor carries the paperwork, the track authority, and the responsibility for every car and every switch behind him. And on most railroads, the engineer takes his instructions from the person in the back seat. Understand the number, because it explains every rung above it. When you are hired, the railroad writes down the date, and that date is your seniority. It never changes and it never resets. Every job posting, every route, every shift, every holiday off for the next 30 years goes to the senior qualified applicant who bids on it. Not the best applicant, the oldest one on the list. Nobody is picked, and nobody moves up for being good at the work. A conductor with 15 years takes the daylight local that runs Monday to Friday, and the man behind him waits for somebody to retire. 2 men in the same yard doing identical work can be living completely different lives because of 11 months on a piece of paper. That is the entire system. Let's start at the bottom. The conductor trainee earns $23.40 an hour, roughly $48,700 a year. Most are 20 to 26. You spend 7 weeks memorizing a rule book that runs past 400 pages, and then you go outside. You learn to line a switch, tie a handbrake and read a train list, and you learn to walk on ballast, crushed rock the size of your fist, in whatever weather the yard hands you. Getting in requires a clean background check, a hearing and vision physical, and a federal certification exam. 19 out of every 100 do not finish, and almost none of them fail on the physical work. They fail the rules exam, which is not a test of knowledge. It is a test of whether you can recite an exact procedure while a supervisor watches you and says nothing. Here is what nobody tells you. You are sent to whatever terminal the railroad needs a body in, so you move to a town you have never seen, on a wage you cannot live on there, before you have earned anything. And everything in that classroom happens at 4 miles an hour. The yard conductor earns $31.18 an hour, roughly $72,400 a year. Most are 23 to 30. Your job is to take a train apart and build a different one. Cars arrive from everywhere and leave in a new order, and somebody makes that happen with his hands. At Bailey Yard in North Platte, Nebraska, the largest rail yard on Earth, they sort roughly 10,000 cars in a day. You do it with a radio, a switch list, and a box strapped to your chest. The box drives the locomotive. You are standing on the ground, walking backward, moving a 4,000-ton machine with your thumb, and you are the only thing between it and whatever is behind you. Getting here requires a remote control certification, a switching qualification, and enough seniority to hold the job. 13 out of every 100 quit before their second winter. Here is what nobody tells you. More railroaders are hurt at walking speed than at track speed. The yard never stops, and the injuries that end careers happen down here at 4 miles an hour. The rung above takes you out of the yard, and it takes your calendar with it. The road conductor earns $38.60 an hour, roughly $96,800 a year. Most are 26 to 40. The town you live in is one end of a line, and the other end is a motel 150 miles away. You take a train there, you sleep, and eventually you bring one back. The work is long stretches of nothing broken by 20 minutes that matter. A train pulls apart at mile marker 81 at 2 in the morning. You climb down, you walk back, you find the broken knuckle, and you replace it. A knuckle weighs 82 pounds. You are alone on the ballast, and the temperature is whatever it is. Getting here requires 2 years of yard experience, a road rules examination, and a successful bid on a posted job. 27 out of every 100 leave the railroad inside their first 5 years, and the money is never why. Here is what nobody tells you. This is the rung where the pay finally becomes real, and it is the exact rung where you stop being able to plan anything. Not a wedding, not a birthday, not a Thursday. That loss has a name. Most road conductors do not have a schedule. They are on what is called the extra board, a list in seniority order, and when a train needs a crew, the railroad calls whoever is at the top of it. Your phone rings, and from that moment, you have about 90 minutes to be at the terminal, dressed, fed, and legal to work. The call can come at any hour because trains run when there is freight, not on a clock. You can protect yourself in exactly one way. You can lay off, which means telling the railroad you are unavailable, and do it too often and you are investigated for availability. Miss a call because you were asleep with the phone on silent, and that is discipline. The people who last do one of two things. They collect enough seniority to hold a scheduled job, which at some terminals takes 15 years. Or they teach themselves to sleep in 90-minute pieces, whenever the house is quiet, for the rest of their working lives. Ask a railroader what this job costs, and this is what he describes. Not the cold, the phone. The locomotive engineer earns $44.90 an hour, roughly $119,300 a year. Most are 30 to 45. You are running 9,000 feet of train, a mile and a half of steel, weighing 18,000 tons, and it does not respond the way anything else you have driven responds. When you brake, the cars behind you keep coming, and the slack runs in like a wave. Handle it badly on a grade, and you pull the train in two, or you put cars on the ground. A loaded freight train at 50 miles an hour needs over a mile to stop, so everything you do is done a mile and a half before it matters. Getting here requires a federal engineer certificate, a simulator and territory program, and a qualification on every route you run, which means knowing each hill, curve, and signal by memory in the dark. 9 out of every 100 wash out of engineer training and go back to conducting. Here is what nobody tells you. The certificate can be taken from you. Pass a stop signal and you are decertified, and the first one costs you 30 days. Enough of them and you lose a year, and your pay drops back to a conductor's while your bills do not. One federal law governs every hour of that job. You may work 12 hours, not 12 and a half. At the 12th hour, the crew is out of time and stops wherever it is, which means a train can die on the main line in the middle of a town, blocking 3 grade crossings, and sit there until another crew is sent out to fetch it. Railroaders call that dog catching. After it, the law requires 10 hours of undisturbed rest, and the word undisturbed was added because railroads used to telephone people during those hours to tell them when they would be working. The passenger engineer earns $52.70 an hour, roughly $141,300 a year. Most are past 35. You run a schedule instead of a freight, which changes everything. Freight arrives when it arrives. A commuter train is late at 30 seconds. You stop at a platform, and the doors have to line up with a mark painted on the concrete, 40 times a shift, in the rain. At a station you have stopped at 9,000 times. Behind you are 1,000 people who will tell somebody about their morning if you get it wrong. Getting here requires a freight or transit engineer background, a passenger service qualification, and a high place on the roster. 87 out of every 100 applicants are turned away before an interview. Here is what nobody tells you. On the big commuter railroads, the overtime is the job. Engineers on the Long Island Railroad and Metro North have cleared more in a year than the managers who supervise them, and they did it by taking every hour the railroad offered. The body does not get a say in that, and one morning in the Bronx that stopped being an argument. On the 1st of December, 2013, at 19 minutes past 7 in the morning, a Metro North passenger train came around the curve at Spuyten, Duyvil in the Bronx, New York. The curve is posted at 30 miles an hour. The train entered it at 82. Every car left the rails. 4 passengers were killed and 59 people were taken to hospitals. There was no alcohol and no drugs, and the brakes and signals tested normal afterward. Less than 2 weeks before that morning, the engineer's shift had been changed, from one starting in late afternoon to one starting before dawn. Investigators found he had severe obstructive sleep apnea that had never been diagnosed. The National Transportation Safety Board concluded that he had fallen asleep at the controls, and that the recent schedule change had made an existing condition worse. Screening for sleep apnea across the passenger railroads followed. It was not required before. The road foreman of engines earns $61.80 an hour, roughly $163,000 a year. Most are past 45. You ride in the cab with engineers and watch them work. You run efficiency tests, which means hiding near a signal to watch whether a crew does what the rulebook says when they think nobody is looking. When an engineer is decertified, you are usually the person holding the paper. Getting here requires years in the seat, a management interview, and a thick skin, because people you worked beside for a decade stop talking to you. 31 out of every 100 quit and go back to the craft. Here is what nobody tells you. Stepping up costs money. You leave the union agreement and the overtime that made those big numbers, and you trade a century of protections for a salary. Plenty took the title and found they worked more hours for less than they made in the seat. The highest earners on this railroad are not in that job at all. They are engineers on crowded commuter lines with 30 years of seniority, working every holiday, clearing well past 200,000. Railroaders are also not in Social Security. They have their own system, the Railroad Retirement Board, funded by higher payments from both worker and railroad, and it pays out substantially more. 30 years of service and an age of 60, and you can go, with a pension for life that is often worth more than everything the person earned while working. That is the quiet reason people stay on a list they cannot move up. The conductor trainee, $23.40 an hour, learning a rulebook. The yard conductor, $31.18, moving 4,000 tons with his thumb. The road conductor, $38.60, and a motel at the far end of the line. The locomotive engineer, $44.90, stopping a mile after he decides to. The passenger engineer, $52.70, and 1,000 people behind him. The road foreman, $61.80, and nobody left to eat lunch with. 31 out of 100 last 2 years, and 27 are gone inside 5. Almost nobody who leaves this industry leaves over money. They leave because a date on a list decides where they will sleep tomorrow night, and there is nothing they can do to move it. Next, every level of a wind turbine technician.